there, and welcome to another episode of The Divorce Couch. My name is Claire, and I'm a divorce coach based in Northern Ireland.
Hi, my name is Salma, and I'm a divorce coach based in London.
Hi, this is Simone from Germany, and I'm the divorce coach based here.
So, welcome to another episode of The Divorce Couch, and as you can see, we have a guest with us this morning. So, this guest is a very good friend of mine that I've known for a very long time, who has been a wonderful friend over the last number of years. And Rosalind is a mediator. So she's with us today to help us to understand the process of mediation, when it's important, why it's important, and we're going to unpack a lot of the concepts and thoughts around it as we unpack the episode. So she's been working as a family mediator, and she trained in 2010. She works privately, and she also works through Family Mediation NI. Now she's a mediation supervisor and a trainer. And before that, had a legal background. She's married. She has 5 almost grown-up children, her words, not mine, a dog and 2 cats. So welcome to the Divorce Couch, Roz, and we'd love you to introduce yourself and give us a starting point of explaining what is mediation and what areas does it cover.
Thank you very much, Claire, and thank you for having me on the couch today. Mediation can be a very constructive process for people who are in the process of separating, to come to agreements to do with their children and to do with their property and finance on separation. So in a nutshell, it is a voluntary process. It's informal. A neutral person, the mediator, works with the 2 parents to see if they can produce a win-win outcome for them. So it is not one person working against another. It's 2 people working together, supported by the mediator. The mediator is impartial, so the mediator doesn't tell them what to do, doesn't give them any form of advice, but supports them and facilitates the difficult conversations that they need to have to reach an outcome that they're both happy with.
Brilliant.
Is there a time when you think, well, let me rephrase it. So basically, I think most people, when they think of separation, they will walk straight into the lawyer's office. Mm-hmm. So mediation being an alternative, at what point, or if we just look at the timeline, do I need a lawyer first and then go into mediation? How would you say is the right time to contact you, and who contacts you?
Okay, well, what I'll say, we'll talk in a little minute about the role that the legal process plays alongside mediation, because it can replace some of it, but not all of it. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the timing for mediation, it depends a lot on the 2 people involved. So quite often we would find that one parent has been further down the emotional journey than the other. One may not have seen it coming and they may be reeling. The other one may have checked out in their head 2 years ago and they're ready to start discussing. It depends on the people. There's a definite too soon, and you have to go at the speed of the person who is on the emotional catch-up. Okay, so you can come to mediation at any time. We have often had people who are still under one roof and they want to negotiate what's going to happen when they leave when one party leaves the home. That can work up to a point. It tends to work better when the 2 homes are already established. But we meet people where they are, and if they come to mediation, and people self-refer usually, Simone, the people will self-refer, they will phone and contact a mediator directly themselves. And we would always speak to people one-to-one first for an hour and ask them for some background and some history. There's always a screening that goes on to make sure that it's safe and to make sure that both people are in an emotional place that they are mediation ready. Mm-hmm. And then only then would we bring people together for the first of up to about 4 joint appointments together with the mediator. So in terms of the timing, I've had somebody who came in 3 days after the separation. They were nowhere near ready emotionally to sit in a room and discuss the way forward apart. On the other end of the scale, if people have become entrenched and they've been through courts 3-4 times, They can either be one of two things. They can either be so entrenched in the adversarial system that they have it's almost too late. It's never too late, but it could be, there's a lot of work to be done to get them back into a co-working mindset. Or they may have been so fed up with the whole process that they say, right, we need a new approach. We need to work together here, particularly when it comes to the children.
So can I ask, Rosalind, you said, that couples, somebody would approach you with up to 4 sessions. Is that a cap, or can somebody have, many more sessions until they come to resolution? Is there a point at which you would say to a client, well, I don't think this is working?
Well, yes, and there can be the reason we in family mediation NI we would say 4, because that is what the funding covers. So
Okay.
there's free funding there's free mediation in Northern Ireland for parents of children under the age of 18 who have not initiated court proceedings, who aren't in current court proceedings, and the funding covers up to 4 joint appointments, which is usually sufficient for child-focused issues.
Mm-hmm.
Parents can pay for more sessions if they want to. There's a bit of a trap that people can fall into where they can end up, it's not counselling, but with a listening ear, sometimes it can slip into some of those issues that they benefit from talking through. And it's very important for the mediator not to let it slip in that direction. Or they can also end up with a series of interim agreements that are kind of like an emergency decision for the next 2 weeks, but they don't actually address the longer term issues. So those scenarios we need to be very careful of. If clients want to pay, they can keep coming, but it's not a therapy and it mustn't be treated like a therapy. Now, for separation of assets, that's a very different kind of mediation, that their documents need to be disclosed, and sometimes it takes a long time. So I closed one this week that was 5 appointments. If they'd had all their documents ready at the first appointment, it might have been 3.
Okay.
So the financial mediation then, Rosalind, is that to do with coming to an agreement between the 2 parties on how to divide the assets, such as the pensions, the properties and the monies, rather than going through 2 solicitors? Is that my understanding? Is that correct?
Yes, so it's not instead of any contact with solicitors. So what they need to do, we would say, please go to your solicitor and get basic advice on what the range of reasonable outcomes would be in the separation of assets, because a solicitor will work on the basis of percentages, rough percentages, but there's no black and white rule. So we would ask clients to to get their solicitors to advise them on things like their pension, and those could be very complicated things, and they can need specific legal or financial or specific pension advice. So the solicitor will guide them on that, and then what they do with us is they come equipped with that, and they sit down together and work out how they want to divide those assets out.
And is that covered as a grant funded, or is that something that's part of mediation? Is that paid for by the clients?
That's paid for by the clients. So the only funded mediations is to do with the child focus, to do with the children and when they spend time with mum and when they spend time with dad.
What would you say? I mean, I remember that going into my separation, that I loved the idea of mediation. The way it unfolded, we weren't ready for mediation. It had to do with I think you want to talk about it later with the power imbalance in a couple. I love the idea, though, when I spoke to the woman, that she was a lawyer, because I liked the idea that she knew what we would bring into mediation. In preparation of this talk, have seen that in Germany, mediators don't necessarily need a legal background, and I find that very difficult to comprehend. So from your perspective, if our viewers are looking for this route, what should they look for in a mediator to say, okay, well, this is the person that is a fit for us?
That's interesting, Simone, because some mediators are lawyers, some are non-practicing lawyers, and some are practicing family practitioners. And some mediators come from a counselling background or a social work background, so there's a lot of variety. Each mediator will have their own strengths, and any mediator that has been or is a practicing solicitor or lawyer, they have to switch hats. So they are not operating as a solicitor. They are not advice giving. They are supporting both. So it's very important, whether the mediator is a practicing solicitor or not, that they take that hat off and put on their mediator's hat, and that's a separate skill set and it's separate training. So when someone is choosing a mediator, it's very important that it's an unregulated profession, really. It's relatively recent. There is no one overview body that regulates. So anyone can set themselves up as a mediator, and practicing solicitors do that. Practicing social workers and counsellors can set themselves up as a mediator. So in UK and Ireland, we have mediation accrediting bodies. Mm-hmm. So in Ireland, Mediators Institute of Ireland, and in the UK, then College of Mediators, Family Mediation Council. There are a number that will accredit people for mediation. Now, the lawyers, the barristers and the solicitors have a mediation service. That tends to lean towards the commercial mediation model, which is all in one day. So for commercial disputes, it tends to work better. They'll hire out a hotel. They may have lawyers present, and they will just spend one day and they advise their clients. The mediator tends to go between the two parties, and they have got their lawyers present, and they will thrash out a response so that everybody can move on at the end of the day. That's the goal. Family mediation is very different. It's very much more part of a journey, which is why we don't use that model. We use that model of meeting over several appointments that are a few weeks apart.
Mm-hmm. And that gives time then for the couple to go away and mull over it, because, you know, in my experience, we used family mediation and it was absolutely invaluable to help us to come to an arrangement for the children that we still use today. So that's, 7 years down the line, we're still using it. And what I know from my experience is that the time we had our mediator, and our mediator was chosen for us. And I have to say she was fantastic. But we were able to go away after each session, and we each had something to think about to be able to come back the next time. So you had time and space to go, does that fit? Does that work? What do I feel? How do I, so if we had done all of that at the one time, I know for me, I wouldn't have had that space and time to get to where we got to, where we were both in agreement that this was a good way to go forward. So that space in between the appointments in my world and experience was really invaluable. And that's hindsight looking back. But I see why it was like that, and it was very good.
That's lovely to hear, Claire. And we do feel that it's very important for people to go away and sleep on it and mull it over, and even try out an interim arrangement for a weekend with children and see how did that work. And let people come back, and quite often, some of the problems have resolved, or other problems that we want a robust agreement. So there's no point in cobbling something together and trying to get it completed and out the door. It needs to be robust. It needs to be future proofed, and we will ask the questions to say, okay, what happens with this? Here's what you're talking about. What happens when somebody's sick? Do you need to discuss who the children are left with if one of you can't take them? Or what happens if communication breaks down again? How are you going to cope with that in a way that preserves the best interest of the children? So we will ask the questions to make sure that the agreement is robust going forward. And it's wonderful to hear of an agreement that's still in operation 7 years later. And if you or anybody else wanted to come back, under the funded service, people can come back and say, right, we need to discuss. Sometimes it's a single issue.
I didn't realise that, actually.
School, what school are they going to go to? That can be a real problem. And it may be one issue later on, or it may be the fact that now people who have had primary school children now have teenagers, and they have different issues to deal with, and they may want to come back to talk about that. So, I think mediation, one of the strengths of it is it meets people where they are. and it just, sit down, tell us what's the situation. And every couple is different. There are themes and there are patterns, but every couple is different and they're accepted as different. And what are your issues today? And whether it is, people, the youngest I've had in mediation is a 19-year-old. I've had people in their 60s. I've had same-sex couples. I've had whatever is going on for those people with children in the middle or with assets to divide. We meet them where they are.
When do you know they're not ready? Sorry, Salma.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
That's a really good question, Simone. So the whole thing is voluntary, and we need to be very sure that they haven't been pressured into it. So sometimes we will find if one person has been pressured, sometimes a solicitor may say it will look bad for you if you don't do this. And we tend to, there are very carefully worded questions that we would ask in the one-to-one to throw up issues of voluntariness, but also to throw up issues of emotional mediation readiness. So we would get a sense from the emotions of the person that if they're very emotional, that would be not a barrier at all, but that would mean we would ask a few more questions. How would you feel about sitting with the person in this room? We also ask, would you have given the same answers if the person had been here? That's quite a telling question for issues of safety, and we do screen for domestic abuse and coercive control issues and that kind of thing. Those can be very subtle. We will ask what would be a good outcome for you, what would be a good outcome for your ex-partner, and what would be a good outcome for your children. And sometimes the way those questions are answered would flag up a certain emotional headspace. And are you willing to work together is a very direct question that we ask. Why have you come to mediation? We'll ask open worded questions so that we'll just build a picture. And if we aren't sure, we can go to our own supervisor and just say, right, here's the scenario, not sure. And we can set up a first appointment and then see how it goes and see how they feel at the end of it.
And if you feel a couple isn't suitable for mediation, how does that outplay?
So what we will never say to them is you are not suitable for mediation. What we will say is that our service isn't suitable for you, or mediation isn't suitable for you at this time. We do not give reasons because, and we tell them this before we make that decision, that we will not give reasons. It's a confidential issue. It may be that someone is there under pressure and they really don't want to be there. It may be that there is a domestic abuse situation, but we don't want one person to be left in a vulnerable position for having disclosed something. So we will just generally say our service isn't suitable for you at this time. And timing again is a big issue. So it may be that in 6 months it is suitable. So
they could apply again.
Yeah.
Can I ask, are there any options for couples that for whatever reason, whether it's the power dynamics or the emotional state that they're in, don't want to be in the same room, but they do want to have those discussions towards a resolution?
Yes, we can do what we call shuttle mediation. So the mediator would go between the two rooms. Okay. Now, it can work. It's less successful because, we would certainly do that on safety grounds at times, and sometimes we would take a break and ask people to go into separate rooms, and I would go between them for a part of the session just to cool things down if it gets too intense. It's less likely to get people into the joint problem-solving mindset if they are in separate rooms, and it can slip into more sort of legal negotiation, which is okay. That can be better than nothing. We just need to be careful with that. But yes, and certainly if there's a power imbalance or somebody feels triggered by anxiety, if they're in the presence of the other person, we would need to ask, is mediation suitable to start with? But then it may be that, yes, okay, but we will keep them in separate rooms at least to start with. So it's a less favoured approach, Salma, but it can work. Family mediation NI, for instance, would much prefer people to agree to work together in the same room, but we can accommodate that if people are anxious, if it really needs it.
Sorry, go ahead, Simone.
No, please continue.
There was just a question off the back of that. If you do, like you said, if you are sort of you're screening the clients, and if you do feel that something has come up that concerns yourself, although you're not going to tell the client, is there like a signposting process that then kicks in?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So we would say to people, we would have a list of contacts for people to go to. We would always have in Women's Aid, a charity for women who have been subjected to domestic abuse. We would have their phone number to hand. We would have social services phone number to hand. We would have counselling contacts for people. In fact, I had a really, really difficult case on Zoom with someone and with a co-mediator, and they were disclosing for the first time domestic abuse, and it was actually coercive control, and it was really subtle but really bad. And she said she'd never told anyone before. So we but she was terrified that her they were still in the same house, and she was terrified that if she didn't do mediation, that he would then blame her and it would get worse. So we at that point, when certain issues were disclosed, we just said, look, would you like us? Would it be helpful for you if we said mediation wasn't suitable? Because I have deep concerns here. And she looked very relieved and said yes. In fact, she needed to leave the house to sit in a car because she was concerned about there was a hidden camera. So when that happened, then we were able just to come alongside her and chat and be supportive, and signpost her to other services that would be supportive. So we sometimes find that with coercive control situations that people haven't actually realised that's what they're in, because it's so subtle and it's been their normal.
Been their normal, yeah, that's what I was going to say. But what a valuable gift to give somebody by providing the space where that was able to come into the open. I mean, that's enormous. And that shows the safety of the space that this lady felt, that she could open up and talk about it and express that it was the first time she'd said it, And I think that in itself is so enormously helpful for the future for every part of that scenario.
But it seems I have to say that it is completely different in Northern Ireland than it is in Germany, because you seem to be tied into a system, and I love to hear that, right? That whatever is happening in mediation, it doesn't stop there. But you know what? There is, it's all connected. It's within a system. Literally, and I love to hear that. I don't think that's possible here in Germany. What I would like to know, which kind of like goes from here, I remember because I was divorcing in Singapore, which is common law, we would have this concept that nobody in Germany understood, which is this without prejudice. So basically, so much is being talked about, and if it wasn't successful, the written conversation wasn't allowed to be used in court. So what in mediation, if people come to you and they disclose an awful lot of information, and after the fourth time they come to the conclusion this hasn't worked for us, what do you do with what has been said on either side with the information? Can you use it, or how do you take it from here?
Well, we would stress to people right from the start that what they say is confidential and the discussions are without prejudice. So as regards the confidentiality element of it, we will always stress that there's an exception to that if there's evidence, or if somebody discloses something regarding child protection, that it's not confidential then, or evidence of a crime, we have to disclose that. As regards the without prejudice element of the conversations, so legally they're classed as negotiation. It's supported negotiation. So the content, as you say, under a common law system, Simone, is without prejudice privileged. So the law wants to support people in trying to work out their own disputes. But if it doesn't work and they subsequently go to court, the most significant outworking of that is that they can't call the mediator to give evidence in court about what was discussed. They can both agree to disclose it because the privilege belongs to both of them, but one can't disclose the contents of the discussion. Now, if somebody were to pick up a chair and throw it across the room during a session, that's not a privileged piece of information. It is the actual nuts and bolts of the discussions that are privileged.
Okay.
So when you go into trial, you cannot use what the other person has said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Unless they both agreed. So yes, they can't weaponize what the other has said in a negotiation.
And can you, because obviously mediation is there, you've got the child aspect of it and the financial aspect of it. Is it possible to have a scenario where you're able to agree the childcare, but you're not able to agree the financials, or vice versa? And so you can sort of complete your childcare agreement within mediation and then decide that actually the financials will go to court, or vice versa?
Yes, absolutely. And that is not uncommon for people to be able to agree the issues to do with the children, excuse me, but not be able to agree the issues to do with finance. So one word about the finance end of things, it is based on trust. So all of mediation is based on trust. So if somebody can't trust the other person, that is a question mark for suitability. If somebody does not trust the other person to disclose all the relevant financial information, then we would say, if you cannot trust that person to disclose it, then we can't do a finance mediation. And sometimes that is the heart of the problem, that they don't trust the other person. So we would ask people to produce the same documents that a solicitor would ask. We don't verify them, and we don't we don't chase them. If they won't produce them, then we can't do the finance mediation.
Yes, it's voluntary. Yeah.
So you don't have any, like, obviously when you go to court, you sort of are obliged to do a full financial disclosure, and there are, I suppose, theoretically, there's punishments if you are found to be, not disclosing. So as in a mediation meeting, the mediator doesn't actually have any jurisdiction to force somebody to provide proof, or if one party thinks that the other party is not doing a full disclosure,
you
don't have any sort of legal sort of jurisdiction to say, well, actually you need to provide this.
Yeah, we are not able to enforce it. It's voluntary, and it's based on trust.
Yeah.
So it is for people who want to work it out together and can trust each other's disclosure.
Can I just jump in here? I know you might want to close, sorry.
It's okay.
Reading Bill Eddy, who's also a mediator, and I love him because he's very much into high conflict. What he would then do, because I think one of his books is called What is Your Proposal? Because he has been a lawyer. What he then does is, if they don't move forward or don't disclose, he then also says, that is okay, that is your decision, but there will be a consequence. Do mediators do that then sometimes? Just kind of like, say, if somebody is not willing to share children or not willing to disclose, do you have enough authority to say that is okay, but it will come with a consequence? So you also, it's a bit like parenting, right? You know what, you can choose to, I don't know, use your iPhone 5 hours, but the consequence is you might not be able to use it for another week, because that is our, that's something we have agreed upon. Do you do that? Do you kind of like push them a little bit?
No, we might reality check. Okay, what will happen if you don't disclose everything here? Is that your the other party's only option is going to be to get a solicitor to enforce it. That's the only reality check that we would do. But we would I would say to the other person, look, this person hasn't been disclosing. If you're saying to me they aren't disclosing everything, they are not willing to do this. And we would say then that mediation isn't suitable. So we need to be very careful with that one, that we don't, that to me would be overstepping my remit to be able to say that to someone. But we would reality check the situation, that if you don't disclose, what do you think?
I love that phrase.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That
love
phrase
this.
it's very good because it does say the same thing, but in a different format. So we're going to be coming to a close shortly, but we touched on this at the very beginning. And would you spend a few minutes, Roz, just talking about what's your perspective on the roles of mediation and the legal system with solicitors and how they coexist and timings and things like that? Because I think that's important for our listeners.
Yeah, certainly. So I think it's very important for people to understand the role of a solicitor in any scenario for you. So a solicitor can operate on 3 levels. So they can, as a client, you go to a solicitor, you can say, please advise me. What does the law say? What are my rights? What are my responsibilities? That's advice. Tell me what the law says and how it applies to my situation. The second level is to say, please negotiate on my behalf with the other party or their advisor. And that would be the solicitor sending letters backwards and forwards to make proposals and counter proposals. And then the third level is, please represent me in court. I want to take this to court. Please take this to court for me. Now, as you go up those levels, the client will have less and less control over the details. Okay. So when it's very important that the courts are there, and I am not anti-court and I'm not anti-lawyer. The courts are there as a last resort, but they shouldn't be a first resort, because particularly when it comes to people and their children, they know their children best. And what you can achieve in a mediated agreement can be incredibly detailed. It can cover time spent with mum and dad. It can cover holiday time. It can cover where the pets go, who packs the swimming bag, what school they're going to go to, granny's birthday party, all of those issues where a court can't get down to that level of detail. The parents know their children best and they can. They can get legal advice as regards the children issues if it makes them feel more comfortable. That's fine, but they don't need it with children. We would say with the assets division, finance mediation, we would say it is essential to get legal advice, but the mediation replaces the negotiation. So people can say, please give me the legal advice, and then they go away and they do their own negotiation in mediation and then come back, and in a divorce situation, it will have to go through court, but the agreements will already have been made. So it's important that people know that your solicitor works for you, that you give them instructions, that you don't have to do what they tell you. You ask them to do what you want them to do and say what you don't want them to do. And if a couple doesn't want to have a fight in court over something, then they don't have to have it. And they just need to be sure that they know what level of intervention they're asking their solicitors to do and what they're comfortable with.
And that ties very much into what we on the Divorce Couch talk about, is who's in the driving seat of your divorce. And we've done episodes on, going to your solicitor and how do you see your representation legally? What's your role within that? Because it is really important, because it is your life, it is your story, and it is your divorce. And solicitors don't know the whole of your life. They know the bit that you show them when you go in through their door. So that is very much along where we all are in how we see the process unfolding and how we see the role of our clients and our listeners in that process.
I just have one last question off the back of what you just said, Rosalind, because it's something that comes up quite a lot. Clients often ask me this question, and I'd like to hear it from yourself. So the agreement then becomes a legally binding document, and at some point.
Yes, so what we produce in mediation is not legally binding in this jurisdiction, but they need to take it to a solicitor to put it in a legally binding format if that is what they want to do. And if it is a divorce, they will need to do that as regards the financial element of it. If it is a parenting agreement, a time with mum, time with dad, it never needs to be put in a legally binding format. If both people are happy with it, that's fine. If they want it in a legally binding format, they can do that, but that's done outside the mediation.
Thank you.
Yeah, because when we had our 4 sessions in mediation, we were both given a written document of the overview of the process, the points that we had agreed on for going forward, things like speak to each other in a respectful manner, the children are going to do this, this, and this. And then we were advised that we could have it ratified through court by a solicitor if we wanted to, but we got a very comprehensive document of what we had discussed, what we had agreed upon, and we had voluntarily agreed on this. And it was a very, very detailed sum up of what we had come to, and it was really, really, really helpful, and to have something to go back to read in a year's time and go, oh yes, we had talked about that, because you forget things. So when we finished our mediation process, we had something very solid that we could both use to go back and have as a reference point, which was, that in itself was enormously helpful, I find.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it tends to be written more or less in the client's own words rather than in legal language. And it's it is a very personal document. Just a final word on lawyers. There are some very good lawyers out there who will work collaboratively with other lawyers. The basic mindset is that it is adversarial, so they have to fight your corner, and sometimes people need someone to fight their corner. And I have said to people, please get a solicitor, because you need someone in your corner, particularly if there are control issues. And mediation, I don't want mediation's not going ahead because there isn't a level playing field for it to work out. But the way it is handled will set the tone for the new normal that these people have to live with long after the bill has been paid and the lawyers have gone home. And it's very important that people don't lose that sense of control over the process.
Yeah. Well, we have gone over our time, but I think it was very valuable. I think it was really worth going over time, because Rosalind, you've given us an enormous amount of information and clarity around a subject that a lot of people know very little about. I must say, when I started my divorce journey, I knew about mediation but didn't understand the benefits and the reasons and have expected outcomes. And I'm very grateful to you for coming on today to help us out with that. And I think the overview that I understand is that it is a very valuable section of a journey, on a divorce journey, that I feel is worth exploring. I sort of feel that for the benefit, especially when there's children, for the benefit of the children, the thing that I picked up is what mediation can achieve. It can be achieved in a much shorter time frame than a legal system. So if you're going through a solicitor for children, or you go through mediation, you can have a child agreement in a much shorter time space, in a non-threatening environment, to allow forward movement and to create a new set of normal, to reduce emotions around a couple, is one of the things that I sort of took from this. And that there is a definite role for a solicitor and a mediation process. And we've talked about when it's appropriate. So in the north of Ireland, mediation for family mediation NI is accessible before legal proceedings start, as a funded process, which is enormously helpful for people to know and understand. But also, you've told us and given us information that not every couple that apply for mediation are going to be accepted for a mediation process, because for whatever reason, it's not the right timing for them. And I love the fact that there is the ability to go back at a later stage. That is something that I think is enormously helpful. So I'd love to ask you to do a bit of a quick wrap up on what you feel from what we've talked about are the important things to highlight, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, no problem. So just to conclude, to step back a bit from the detail, then mediation is a voluntary process. It's not for everybody and it doesn't fix every dispute, but where it works, it can work very well. If both people are in the same place emotionally, relatively similar places emotionally, and want to work together, it can be a really positive way to resolve their own disputes in a way that works for both of them. And it can lead to what we call a soft outcome of improved communication, because people have learned to listen to each other. They've learned how to manage their own conflict and how to manage the dispute between them, and have learned to communicate in new ways. And most of that is learning to listen to the other person. So it's not a cure-all for all problems, but where it works, it can work really well. And certainly I would encourage people to at least find out about it. And you can find out about it on your one-to-one and decide if it's something that you want to take forward. That is available.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for listening. We
You're
hope
very
you will
welcome.
find this episode extremely valuable. And we would love you to like, subscribe and share, and especially share this episode with people that are maybe in a situation where this would be information that they're not aware of. This might change the outcome of the journey that they're on, and therefore it is invaluable. So we look forward to seeing you the next time on our next episode of The Divorce Couch. And until then, stay safe and keep well.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.